In the dimly lit halls of medieval Europe, where power and faith collided in a web of corruption and intrigue, there was one figure whose influence could shift the fate of entire kingdoms: the Pope. But what if I told you that some of these men, revered as the divine representatives of God on earth, were hiding dark secrets, secrets that were as sinful as they were scandalous? Today, we're diving into the world of the most notorious, scandalous popes of the Middle Ages. These were not pious men who lived by the Bible's every word. They were ruthless, power-hungry, and willing to do whatever it took to secure their position, including betrayal, murder, and unspeakable acts of indulgence. Imagine a time when popes had the power to excommunicate entire countries, when their word was law and their reach extended across continents. These men were the very definition of power, but their actions often betrayed the very faith they were supposed to uphold. For instance, take Pope Alexander VI, one of the most infamous popes in history. Alexander VI was not your typical pope. Instead of devoting himself to the church, his devotion was to his family, the Borgia family, whose name became synonymous with corruption, murder, and deceit. This man was willing to use the church as a political tool to increase his family's wealth and power, even going so far as to use the papacy to arrange marriages for his children and secure lucrative positions for his relatives. His reign was marked by a web of corruption so thick that it's no wonder he earned a reputation as the most scandalous pope in history. But Alexander VI wasn't the only one. Let's not forget Pope Benedict IX, a pope who was so infamous for his debauchery and his scandalous actions that he was dubbed the most corrupt pope of all time. He was only 11 years old when he ascended to the papacy, and his reign was marked by extreme indulgence. He was notorious for his sexual escapades, often engaging in immoral acts with young men and women. He even managed to buy his position, a first in papal history. Benedict IX's life was a whirlwind of indulgence, scandal, and a complete disregard for the vows of chastity he had sworn as a cleric. His time as pope was so controversial that he was eventually driven out of Rome by his own supporters and became a symbol of the Church's darkest and most shameful period. But the list of scandalous popes doesn't stop there. Pope Urban VI, who ruled from 1378 to 1389, is remembered for his violent temper and his decision to excommunicate dozens of his enemies. Urban VI was so brutal that even his own clergy began to fear for their lives. He's believed to have had a violent outburst during one of his meetings with the College of Cardinals, throwing objects at them in a fit of rage. But Urban VI's greater scandal came later, when he initiated the Western Schism, which led to the division of the Catholic Church for nearly 40 years. The Church was never the same after Urban VI's reign, and the damage he caused to the Church's image is still felt today. And then there was Pope Innocent VIII, who took office in 1484. This pope is infamous for something not many people know about. Pope Innocent VIII was one of the key figures behind the Church's brutal witch hunts. Under his leadership, thousands of men and women were falsely accused of witchcraft and executed. These hunts, which were fueled by superstition and fear, resulted in the deaths of thousands of innocent people. Innocent VIII's reign saw the rise of the Inquisition, an institution notorious for its methods of torture and its zeal to root out heresy at any cost. Innocent VIII's papacy is remembered for one of the darkest chapters in the Church's history, and his role in the witch hunts makes him one of the most despised popes in history. But perhaps the most audacious and outrageous scandal occurred under the reign of Pope Sixtus IV, whose pontificate from 1471 to 1484 was marked by a series of corrupt and illegal acts. Sixtus IV was the man who helped to fund the construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. But it wasn't the project that marked him as a scandalous figure. It was his relationship with the infamous Medici family and his involvement in the infamous Pazzi conspiracy. The Pazzi family, with the help of Sixtus IV, conspired to assassinate Lorenzo de' Medici and his brother Giuliano in an effort to take control of Florence. The conspiracy failed, and the repercussions were brutal. But Sixtus IV's involvement in this plot proves that his lust for power was more important to him than anything else. He was willing to use the power of the papacy to orchestrate murder in the name of political gain, and his involvement in the Pazzi conspiracy is one of the most shocking moments in the history of the Church. These were not isolated incidents. These were men who had the authority of God's word in their hands, but chose to use that power to fulfill their own desires. They became not just spiritual leaders, but political power brokers who were willing to manipulate, deceive, and control entire countries. The Church, once seen as a pure and righteous institution, became tainted by their actions, and the scars of their scandalous reigns remain to this day. Now, it's easy to think that these men were mere anomalies, that their actions were simply the result of their individual flaws. But the truth is far more disturbing. The papacy itself, as an institution, was often complicit in their actions. The Church, as an institution, was more concerned with maintaining its power and influence than with preserving the sanctity of the faith. In many ways, the Church became a political machine, and the popes were nothing more than its ruthless leaders. But the most shocking aspect of these scandals is the fact that the people of the time were willing to accept such behavior. The medieval world, rife with superstition and ignorance, had no way of understanding the true nature of the Church's corruption. And even if they did, they had no power to stop it. The popes were gods on earth, and no one dared to challenge their authority. The scandals we now look back on as dark moments in history were once the actions of men who were untouchable, their sins hidden behind the veil of religious devotion. And this brings us to a powerful question. How did the Church recover from these scandals? How did it continue to wield such power in the face of such corruption? The answer lies in the same thing that allowed these men to rule unchecked: the unwavering faith of the people. Despite the corruption at the top, the people continued to revere the Church. They continued to believe in the divine authority of the Pope, even when that authority was used to serve earthly desires. The power of the Church was never truly about faith. It was about control, manipulation, and fear. As we look back on these scandalous popes of the Middle Ages, we are reminded that history is often not as simple as it seems. The men who held the keys to the kingdom of heaven were, in many ways, the same men who condemned others to hell. Their reigns were filled with corruption, debauchery, and a thirst for power that knew no limits. But their power, as corrupt as it was, also gave birth to the Church's greatest achievements. Because power, no matter how misused, always leaves a mark on history. So, what can we learn from these scandalous popes? We can learn that the thirst for power is universal, that those who seek power are often willing to betray the very ideals they profess to uphold. We can learn that institutions, no matter how noble their origins, can be corrupted by the individuals who lead them. And we can learn that sometimes the greatest scandals are the ones we refuse to see. These popes may have fallen from grace, but they were also the ones who shaped the world we live in today. But now, let's turn the spotlight on you. What do you think about these scandalous popes and their actions? Do you think their behavior was the result of their time, or do you believe they were simply corrupt individuals? Leave a comment below and let's discuss how power and religion collide in history. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark history of the papacy, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more historical revelations. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest content.